So something new here. This is called Aesthetic Firearms, Colt Single Action Army. And so today I want to take a look at a gun. This is not a shooting video. I'm not going to teach you how to take it apart. None of that. We're just going to look at the gun. So today we're going to be looking at this beautiful Colt Single Action Army. This gun is original holster from the time period as well. This gun is empty. I'm putting it on half cock. We can check out the cylinders. There is nothing in this gun. It is empty. Etc. So the gun is completely empty and safe. This gun is a 3840 with a 5.5 inch barrel. This particular revolver was made in 1904. This is a first generation Colt. This has been a dream weapon of mine since I was a child. This gun, I'm going to tell the story of this gun a little bit. I'll talk about some other things, but in relation to the firearm itself, the story of how I got it was during the COVID pandemic thing, right? I would go to pawn shops, and a lot of pawn shops suddenly had really old firearms. And this one appeared, I believe it was around July or August of 2020 in one of the pawn shops that I would frequent. Not just for guns, but other things, whatever, music, DVDs. The story on this gun was that, I'm in Central Texas, by the way, but this gun belonged to somebody here who had pawned the firearm repeatedly. That's what the gentleman at the store told me at the pawn shop. The gun had been pawned evidently at least 2 times prior to finally being lost, meaning that they didn't come back to buy it back, to give the money back for the loan that they got. So the gun ended up going out on display. When I saw this in the pawn shop, I was just completely flabbergasted, and I debated it, because it was relatively expensive to me. It was over $1,000, let's put it that way. And that's a lot of money. But I said, man, there's no way I could pass it up. They weren't sure about the caliber. The gun's finish is very patinaed here. You can see it is very worn. This gun has never been refinished. As far as I can tell, this is as original as it gets, as authentic, so to speak, as it gets. I mean, this is the real deal. This gun was pawned, finally was lost. I said, okay, I'm going to pick it up. And I did. And it was, when I investigated the caliber a bit, it wasn't 45 long Colt. It was the third most popular chambering for the Colt Single Action Army, which was 3840. It's not a common cartridge, but you can find it. And I ordered rounds, blah blah blah. I think it was Black Hills. That's who I got some cowboy action shooting ammo from them. This gun, look at its original grips. It is not in perfect shape. I've never taken the cylinder out. The cylinder rod seems to be kind of jammed in there. And if you look closely, you can see that somebody was evidently pounding on it, trying to probably take out the cylinder, And does the gun fire? Yes. I have fired the gun many times. But I'm not making, again, this is not a shooting video. This is just looking at the gun and admiring its just aesthetic beauty, this perfection of a firearm. If you ever handle one of these and you're going to cock it, then make sure you pull it all the way back before you drop the hammer. Don't do the half thing and then drop it. That's not good for the firearm. I have always admired these firearms. I got interested when I was a child in these firearms. Of course, the cowboy movies was a big thing too, but I used to read a lot of magazines, a lot of gun magazines, and this gun just struck me when I was a child at how beautiful it is. It's just like this perfect creation as far as a firearm goes. It's just got this perfect, it's almost indescribable. It's just a perfect weapon. It's a beautiful, beautiful firearm. And yes, it works just fine. So this gun is 120 years old, and it's still going. 120 years later. The finish is pretty gone. Now, there's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, and this is one of the interesting things about the firearm. I didn't notice it immediately until I got home. If you look at the trigger guard, look carefully at the trigger guard. I know the video, I'm not a professional, so don't get mad at me about my camera. I don't want to hear it unless you're going to buy me one. There's 5 notches on the trigger guard. 5 notches. Right there. 5 notches on this gun. So again, I don't know who owned it. I don't know what the notches represent, but I have a kind of a feeling for a gun that's traveled through time for 120 years. This was somebody's beauty. They carved stuff on it and stuff. It's got some initials down here. It's got some X's down here. It has a 3 initials here, which are hard to make out. It's like BIR maybe. And on the bottom it has 3 X's carved into it. And, of course, like I said, the finish is all original. This has never been reblued. This is just how it has worn out over 120 years. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. And now people always ask me, well, how did you get into guns? You're like this literary person and poet and all this kind of stuff, and write books. How'd you get into firearms? Well, I got into firearms, again, pretty much the same way I did a lot of things, and that was through reading. And one of the books that was a big influence I read in 1979 when I was in 5th grade, 79, 80. And that book was this, Saga of the Colt 6-Shooter and the Famous Men Who Used It. Okay, and now this book even has a story as well. This, of course, is not the original library copy from my 5th grade library when I was in school in South Texas. Of course not. Okay. But this book has a story too. So my mother was curious about that, because I've collected firearms for, I don't know, the last 30 odd years or whatever. And she asked me what was it that got me so interested in firearms. And I told her. I didn't have this book at the time. I said, it was a book I read in 5th grade called The Saga of the Colt 6-Shooter. And so I told my mom that. And next thing I know, it arrives in the mail for me. So my mother went out and got it for me. Of course, the interesting thing about that is my mother knew I was interested in firearms way back then. And she bought me one of my favorite books on firearms, which is this book by Ian V. Hogg, which if you're into guns and books about firearms and weaponry, that you probably know his name. This book was given to me by my mother in about 1981. I've been 6th grade, and this gun has this book has everything in it. You name it: Gatling guns and flintlocks and muskets and the Stormgewehr, assault rifle, and MP40 and blah. Like the whole revolution of firearms throughout history. But of course, when I read this book, it had this absolutely beautiful display here. Let me open this up for you guys. Of the Colt, and of course they call it here the Colt Frontier. The Colt Single Action Army, the Model P, Model 1873, the new whatever you want to call it, the Frontier, blah blah blah. It had a bunch of different names. Judge Colt and his jury of 6 was another thing that they would say about it, and fear no man, regardless of size. With the Colt 45, you can equalize. I thought all that stuff was cool when I was a kid. And it had the thing about this book that's really cool is it wasn't just, it's kind of related to this idea of the aesthetics, is how does the gun actually work and function? And so they have this beautiful diagram in there of the Colt Single Action Army and how it all works together. And describe the testing it did when it was originally adopted by the American Army and all that kind of stuff, the American military. So this was a book that really piqued my interest. And this book is the original one that my mother gave me. It's got my little name inside it. The cover got torn here, unfortunately, because one of my bookshelves actually collapsed. So, you know how that is. If you got so many books, which I do. But this book was very influential. If you're a parent or you're a person who likes to know about things, I'd recommend, if you're into the Colt Single Action Army, I'd recommend either one of these books. Outstanding book. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And again, this book, because of the functionality aspect of it, just learning how they function, like, wow, this is a book that's pretty interesting, So anyway, let's take one last look at this Colt. And again, this holster is also original time period. I'm guessing there's another story behind this one. This Colt, this holster came with another Colt single action with a 7.5-inch barrel that was in .45 long Colt that was made in around 1891 that I briefly owned, and then I ended up selling it, and then I kept the holster because it was all original holster. So this holster is probably from either the 1890s, as per the pistol, or early 20th century. Of course, the gun that this came with had a longer barrel, if I remember. No, it was 5.5, I think it was. It was 5.5. I only had it for a short time. I got rid of it. I wanted to get the money because I needed the money. So anyway, so here it is again. Beautiful Colt Single Action Army. Just a beautiful firearm. If you ever get a chance to fire one. I've also owned a replica, one of those Italian replicas. It was nice. But you know, the thing about firearms, in my opinion, you know, is that there's this history behind something like this that, you know, you can't transcend that. You know, that's what makes the gun such an important object. You know, this is the kind of thing that actually should be probably sitting in a museum somewhere. But in the meanwhile, I am the caretaker of this firearm that has traveled through time and space and has been with me for only 4 years, but it's been around for 124. So this gun traveled 120 years before it met me. So I'm now its caretaker until it gets passed on to hopefully a person who will be another caretaker of a weapon like this. This is the kind of thing that, you know, hopefully we preserve. You know, this is again something I would think of would be sitting just fine in a museum somewhere. You know, beautiful firearm. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to be doing some other firearms too, and if anybody has any particular requests, I'm planning on doing some lever actions. I'm planning on doing some bolt actions, other handguns as well. All right, this is Alvarado. Hope everybody enjoyed something different. Y'all have a beautiful day, and Alvarado out.